Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 13 in the 68 Mustang fastback conversion build that I've been working on. In part 12, I installed the cowl panels and I welded the aprons to the firewall. And I always stress this, when you're doing this kind of work, test fit all of your pieces to verify everything is in the right spot before you weld. Very, very important. Now, in this video, what I want to do is work on the roll bar. I've never put in a roll bar in a car other than something that I've driven, like as a stock car or something like that. I've built my own roll bars with the help of others, bending them and shaping them and making them fit the car. Now this is completely different in what I've done. So what I have is a kit here. I don't know who makes this specific kit, but it consists of a roll bar hoop, which is laying on the floor. And as I'm demonstrating in the video here, I'm accessing that through the roof of the car because I have not installed the roof yet. And I'm trying to make sure that the roll bar is going to fit the way I think it should. Now, this kit, as I said, comes with this hoop and it comes with 3 other pieces. And those would be down pieces that go to the back of the car and one that goes across the car. Now, I don't have the interior pieces for this car. So when I talk about test fitting things, this concerns me just a little bit because I want to make sure the roll bar is in the right spot. There's lots of variables to this. You can position the roll bar. In most cases, people look at them vertically or perpendicular. Let's say you got the floor pan here and you've got the roll bar straight up at 90 degrees. That's fine. The reality is, I don't know that that matters. And what I mean is, if you have a roll bar at 90 degrees, that's fantastic. If you do a rollover that is exactly that. So if you roll the car straight over and the roll bar straight up and down, it does what it's intended to do. Now that probably means more if you've got just a roll bar by itself. Now the other way I look at this is if you angle the roll bar back slightly. This helps with the cosmetics. I'm sure you've seen other cars. I know there's Shelbys out there that have the roll bar and it's slightly angled back. And I think from a visual appeal, that looks better. Now this car, there's no back window on the side here. You just have the B-pillar, which is leaning back. So there's some play there. If you put it straight up and down and you have the B-pillar leaning back, it looks, and I know visually I'm messing this up, but it looks kind of odd. So my thought is I would want to lean the roll bar slightly aft at the top. And by having the down pieces, I don't think it makes much difference. The idea is you're trying to keep the roof from compressing onto the passengers or in the car in the case of a rollover. That's the intent. Also, you're adding maybe a little stiffness to the car in the process. This is not, this is basically considered a 4-point roll bar. So if you added roll bar struts to the back and then you came to the front and you came to the middle of the car, then the points of contact increase, which increases stiffness and of course overall strength in case you did have an actual rollover. So let me show you what I'm referring to and what I may have to do to make this work. I also want to point out I'm using my new camera today, so happy to have that. Now if you look at this roll bar, and I demonstrated this in a video where I tried to stand it up and it was hitting the roof. And the reason for that is the width of this roll bar is probably intended for a standard fastback. This has the convertible floor pan. So this inner rocker is in a way fighting this situation. What I may have to do, depending on where this plays out, is I may have to modify, let me look at that one over there, the rocker panel. Okay, so right there the rocker panel is taller than the top of this rear torque box. And I'm considering the idea of actually cutting that out at the top to put in the plate that is going to sit at the base of the rocker, of the roll bar. So this kit comes with these plates. I have not opened this yet, but there's steel plates inside of this, and that's how they packaged it. So there's 4 plates. There's 2 back there and 2 here. And I believe the intent, of course, is to have a plate under each leg in the front, and then have a plate in the back, and then the strut pieces go through this seat panel and attach to those. That's the only way I see this working, because if you consider the idea that the seat panel and this structure is back here, this is the frame rail, so there is no option. You can't come over here and put it on top of the gas tank. That's not going to work. So it has to come through somewhere in that area. Now, as I'm talking about this and the position, so this structure, if you put the roll bar here, it puts it a little more further forward, and it looks, to me, it looks a little bit odd. Like if you taper it back slightly and maybe even tuck it behind this, it's going to look cleaner overall. Now again, we want safety to be the main concern. So what I'm probably going to do, at this point the roll bar is too tall, I may cut off, I don't know, several inches on this bottom and see what I can do to make it fit within this opening. The other part of that is I have a Mustang Thare one-piece headliner that will be going in here. So I have to have enough clearance for that to fit after everything is assembled, because at final assembly that piece has to come in and go up and clear over the top of the roll bar. So I'm going to do some measuring. Right now you can see the roll bar itself is sitting, in this case, just a little bit on that corner of the inner rocker, and if I come around to the other side, it's actually sitting in a similar location. So right there it is as well. Now again, as I was saying, I believe the intent of this was to sit it on top of the torque boxes. You could probably do it down there in the front, and I may look at that, but I really don't have that option, because this roll bar is made for a true fastback that's not modified, like there's no convertible floor pan. The problem I think we run into is if you order one for a convertible, that's different than a fastback, right? So the way it plays out might be completely different here than it would be for this situation. So I'm kind of custom building this as I go. So I'm going to do some measuring and test fitting and see what I can come up with. Okay, now I have a visual representation. So with this factory seat where it would be bolted to the floor, you can see just how close this is to the B-pillar. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm realizing, and I've gotten some information from a buddy of mine who has a 68 Mustang with a roll bar in it. His biggest problem he had was where the bar ended up. So whenever he's got a car that he drag races, and his problem was when you put the crossbar in, you don't have any adjustment for the seat. Like this is pretty far back. I think it's probably at the limit to where it can go back. Now we're not going to be using these. There's going to be some other custom seats that are going to be in this car, but I have to kind of account for this space. So his bar, let's say I put this straight up and down, you know, as much as I can. Right now it's up against it's overlapping this seat. And if I angle it, as I mentioned previously, which I think is cosmetically appealing, that's decent. But still, you're up against this seat. Now, whenever you build something like this, you typically put a support here. So you have the crossbar with the seat belts mounted to it, your 5-point harness or 4 or 5-point harness. But you also put a support structure, or that's the intent, of the bar. But some people add extra pieces to keep the seat from collapsing back. So we have to account for that sort of thing. So while this technically may work, having it right here at the front of the B-pillar, I think it makes more sense to move the bar back. And if I put it back on top of the torque box, and now it's tucked in behind the B-pillar, right? I can have it there, and that kind of gives me that little bit of an angle, and it almost blends in with the opening here. Now, of course, there's going to be trim and stuff like that, that will affect this, but that allows for space here for the seat and the crossbar, and then your mount points for the 4 or 5 point harness system. So I've taken this bar, I have it down below here to represent where it would be, but I think it needs to be further back. And I'm just using this as a visual reference because we're all visual learners, right? Because that bar won't actually be there, but it's just showing me where the location is. So I feel like, and I don't want to do an extreme angle. I don't want it to be like that's the angle of this, and I think that's maybe a little bit too far. So somewhere in this area, I think makes the most sense. I think. So here's what I've decided. I have supported the roll bar with some blocks of wood, and I have it in my Evolution Power Tools chop saw, and I'm going to cut off enough to basically make the height 35 inches from the top of the bar to the rocker panel, and that's putting it at a max height, meaning I can't go any higher or it wouldn't fit, and I don't want to go any lower because I don't want it too low. So we're going to cut this off and do that to both legs. Essentially, I'm cutting off 8 1/4 inches. I'd say that's pretty close. Pretty close. Okay, I have now cut the roll bar down to a height of 35 inches. From the base to the top, and you see here I have wrapped it with some masking paper, and I'll show you why in just a minute. So by looking at this, and again I'm trying to find the best location, I can't come forward and drop down into this area, this well here. These plates are provided with the roll bar, and my assumption is they're 6 inches by 6 inches by 1/8 inch. So I think that's what the standard is for like NHRA, is they want to have that size plate, and I believe they intended for it to go right here. Now I'm okay with that, and I understand adding the extra plate, but really you don't have, this is just a floor pan and the edge of the torque box. So if you used that in that location, which is apparently I'm guessing NHRA standards for drag racing, you really end up with this part of the plate here somewhere on this part of the torque box, and then the rest of it is on floor pan. And maybe that's enough, I don't know, but I don't see that working with the configuration that I have. So there's a space underneath that plate, and I'm back to the idea of cutting out the top of the rocker panel, creating a box, and putting the plate in there in top of that, filling that in, and also attaching it to the top of the torque box. As you can see right here, I'm on the seam or the corner of this rocker panel. So that to me is extra strong because I would be in the mating area for both. There is a flange here, it is welded together. If I notch that out, I will re-weld that and make it solid, and then cut this piece down to fit. I can't have it hanging out here in space. It doesn't help us at all. I could radius this, you know, round it off and bring it back, but that's about all I can do at this point with this setup. And I'm thinking it's really good because you're doing better than just a hole or a floor pan strength. You've got more up there. So on to why this is wrapped. This is the one-piece headliner, and this is, I thought it was Mustangs to Fear, but it's not. It's TMI, and that's too much information, I guess. So there it is, this one-piece fiberglass headliner. And now what I want to do is see if I can get that in place with this roll bar in its current position. Mind you, it's going to drop down maybe ½ an inch based on that gap over there. That's my assumption. It'll drop about half, maybe 3/4, and that's why I wanted to cut it at a taller height. So let's see what happens if I can get this headliner to stay or fit around that roll bar. Okay, so I want to test fit the headliner, and I have Roger.
Hey, gang.
So he's going to give me some assistance because it's kind of awkward. What we want to do is bring it through the driver's side door opening. Which side do you want to be on?
Doesn't matter.
You can feed it in.
I'll catch it.
You'll catch it? All right, so put Roger on the other side. And the idea is I want to make sure this is going to go up and over the roll bar. And that's why I put the paper on there to protect the material on the headliner. So let's see if this works. You can gently bow it a little. I don't know. It's hard to see what it's. Oh, here, hold on. I'm catching on this corner. You got a hand on it?
Yep.
All right, I'm catching. Catching on this. Need to come forward a little bit. There, Mike. Okay. Now, gently put a clamp, because the instructions talk about putting this in and clamping it up in place like this.
Okay.
To keep it, you know. Now, there's a lot of material on this. There's excess material that'll have to be probably trimmed back. But it looks like it fits the front. And I think if we can push this up. Right now it's a little bit overhanging on your side.
Yep.
And my side is probably technically just a hair short.
Okay.
So, there we go. Does that feel better?
Yeah.
I've got
maybe an 1/8 inch over.
That's about what I have. But I don't think that's a problem. I mean, because there's enough room. Proof and point, this will fit in there with that roll bar at that height.
Right.
So.
And chances are it won't stay at that height.
So this, in the front here, we can push that up. I don't need to clamp it, I don't think. I think it's fine. Sides, just a little bit of overhang. They probably give you, make it a little bit long anyway. In the back, it fits up nice on the seam there for the roof. And it looks like, I've got daylight coming in above the bar on this side. I can just, you can get a finger in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Because the bar is not exactly centered anyway. But if I nudged it your way a hair, it would probably give me enough clearance. But this just proves that I can put that in, or we can get it in,
Right.
even at this height. So you can see I have the roll bar angled back slightly, and I think I think it's pretty close to where it needs to be, because we talked about the torque box and using the rocker panel together, so it may go back just a hair. But I could easily drop this 3/4 of an inch. Well, I could just drop it 1/2 an inch by doing my modification there, but I may take a little bit more off the bar just to be safe, because put the seat up and there's a ton of room between this seat and the top of the bar. There's probably at least a foot right there. So, and I know we're going to be using different seats, but I'm pretty happy with that. That looks pretty good. You agree?
I agree.
Okay, we'll take this back out and move on from there. Okay, we've taken the headliner back out, so we know it's going to fit, not a problem. And I have, I think, an idea. Now, as I talked about this before, this plate, the 6x6 plate, I think, you know, they intended it to go here on the floor, and I'm going to move aft and put it back here. So what I want to do is drop this section of the inner rocker panel. I don't see that's going to affect much of anything. I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But by doing that, I can get it closer to the plane of this upper side of the torque box. Now this is at a taper, so I'm not going to worry about that, because once I make my piece here, I can form it down to this and weld it around this perimeter. The idea that I have is to not cut here on this line, but to cut on this line, cut this section out, and then back here cut this line, which is about, I don't know, maybe 1/2 an inch. And what I was thinking of doing was opening this up, this center section, cutting it out right here, and then bending down these two as flanges. And I'll show you why in just a minute, but I want to make these a flange. Then I still have this back wall to work with, and I have a flange here that goes down and creates this channel. So what I want to do, oh, and let me point this out while I'm here. The other thing I have to consider is this mount, which is for the inner finish panel. I don't know the dimensions of this at the moment. I feel like that's pretty close to where it's going to be. But when this is done, that panel comes up here and then comes across, and this will be cut out around the bar to close this out, or to finish it off. So hope that makes sense, what I'm trying to show you. Now, what I want to do with this area is use some of this metal, and let me show you why. So I'm always holding on to scrap pieces, and if you remember, years ago I made a bumper out of this for Frankentruck. That's what the front bumper is made out of. It's not super strong like for a bumper, but it serves its purpose and it does what I wanted it to do. So the 6x6 plate, which I have clamped up here, measures out at 1/15 thickness. This actually measures out at a true 1/8, 125. What this allows me to do is have a 90-degree curve or turn, that if I cut out this section, just eyeballing it here, let's say I cut this, right, and then I trim this down here, now I have a 90-degree turn, and I can set it into that box that I'm going to create over there. What that'll end up doing is giving me a back wall piece that'll weld to the flange for the rocker panel, and then those drop pieces will weld here onto these sides, and then this piece, this section, will be formed down slightly to compensate for that angle and attached to the top of the torque box. So I think that is going to be way stronger overall than a sheet metal floor pan. Gives me multiple angles and pieces that will interact with the base of the roll bar. So I'm going to fabricate one of these and we'll take a look at it. So this piece of metal, I believe it's a channel that may be used in construction of buildings. I had picked this up several years ago when I was looking for ideas for the bumper for Frankentruck, as I mentioned. And so I made a front bumper from that. There's a video on that. This was a leftover piece, and I've just been holding on to it, and it couldn't be more ideal for what I'm trying to do here. So I cut that down to the dimension that I felt was big enough for this purpose. And then I decided to start cutting away at that inner rocker panel. So I wanted to make a box shape by using the existing pieces of that rocker panel. So I cut out that center section and I slowly worked the main piece out. So I had to use a Sawzall here to try making cuts. I was trying different things because I really didn't have a specific game plan. And I found out when I went to the other side, it was a little easier just to use the cutoff wheel. But this worked fine. I was able to cut away these pieces. And once I have this center section out of the way, then I'm going to work on getting the little pieces cut out. So I get this loose, and as I'm identifying what needs to be cut, it's kind of fun for me because as a metal fabricator, like working for the airline, we had to do patchwork or build doublers for sheet metal. So it's not uncommon to try to visualize what you're trying to create. Now, a lot of times they actually give you a blueprint or a template to work from, but you still need to kind of judge what you're building. Now, once I had that dimension cut out, I took the hammer here and I bent these flanges down so that it would create the box that I wanted. A little awkward with the left hand. I'm not as good swinging the hammer as most of us are. We have one dominant hand, and I tried a couple different things to get that to bend the way that I wanted it to. Now, once I have adjusted that, I started sanding down these different pieces of high metal because I knew that I wanted this to fit as flush as possible. And I'm trying to take care of any little piece that's sticking up or is causing a conflict. And I noticed that that area right there where the torque box meets the inner rocker panel, or let's say the inner portion of the inner rocker panel, I had to get that to drop down a little more. I wanted to be able to weld that, so I needed to make room for the weld itself. And I just kept nibbling this down, I guess, with the sanding disc and knocking the edge down with the hammer so that I could drop that slightly downward to make room for my plate that I'm putting in. Again, I'm just trimming up some pieces here, knocking off debris from the edges, and test fitting. Once I have all that in place, I decided to weld that top edge, and I'm taking my time here. The heat is up pretty good on the welder, and I didn't want to just try to burn that whole thing all in one shot. So I'm doing it in segments, and once I have that taken care of, I'm going to sand it down. My sanding disc decided to come apart, so I had to go get another one to finish the job. And that's not a big deal. I have tons of these sanding discs. There was plenty of these that were used slightly for aircraft work, and then they would just toss them. So I would collect up many of those sanding discs, and I have boxes full of those things. So I'll probably never run out. Now what I did here is I put some marks on where I wanted to change the angle. I know I need to bring that forward corner down some, so I just drew an arrow in that corner, and then I also drew lines across the center, and I stuck it in the vise, and I hit it with a hammer just to reshape it. Then I'm trimming off the excess material that I don't need from that top edge. And these grinders, they're fantastic for this purpose with this cutoff wheel. They go right through this stuff like butter. So you get that taken off and cleaned up, knock the edges down, and set this thing into place, and it should be ready to go at this point. There's very little that I need to do other than start welding. Okay, I think that went very well. So you saw in my time-lapse sequence, I cut this open, and my little flange idea, Bent those down so it gives me an attachment point and fills in that gap. Fabricated this piece. I did a little custom bending on it just to make it fit on top of the torque box, and it's like a puzzle piece. So this will be tight against the top of the torque box. This, of course, will get welded the full perimeter. I mean, I'm going to weld everything around the edge and make that completely solid. And I think that's going to do exactly what I needed it to do. And I believe, I'm pretty confident, that that is at least as strong, if not stronger, than the 6-inch plate that you would put in that location. Because I have this flange, which I welded back together, and this structure, of course, and the end of the roll bar is going to end up somewhere about there, I think, is what I calculated. So I'm going to get that piece welded in and continue on from there. Still have to make the other side. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. So here we are. Of course, the passenger side fully welded in, driver side fully welded in, and I can't make that any more solid if I tried. At least I can't think of any other ideas. So I'm very happy with that. Now I wanted to show you something else. You know, the thickness of that piece that I put in was 0.125, and I took the piece that I cut out of the top of the rocker panel, and measure it, and it is 63.063. So I've more than doubled the, well, basically doubled the thickness of the metal that was on top of that rocker panel. So what I want to do now is set the roll bar up in place and verify exactly where I want it to be fore and aft. And I'll probably have to trim it, because even though I can weld and fill in any gaps, you know, that may come around this, I think it may just need to come down a little bit more. So initially when I did all of this, I think it was 35 inches was my number, and that gave us enough clearance for the headliner to go in, but I'd like it to be down just a little bit more. So I'll fine tune that, but let's set the roll bar up in there and take a look at it. Now what I had done before, just as a keeper, let's say, was I put some vice grips on the flange on the backside of the A-pillar, just to give it a starting point, so that it couldn't fall. So reposition this. And of course I will do some measuring to make sure I have it side to side in the right location, or at least what I feel is good. But this, I mean, even at this, it would probably not have any issue with the headliner, but I'm probably going to just take it down a little bit more. Let me show you the angle on the bottom. So there's the little bit of a gap, and honestly I could weld that. It doesn't have to fit completely flush to that plate. And the angle pushes it up just behind the opening here on the curve, which is nice because it kind of hides the bar, makes it look cleaner. As I said, this will probably be no issue, but I think I'll take it down just, I don't know, a quarter inch maybe, even just re-angling that slightly just to let it sit down in there. But yeah, that looks really good. All right, I think it's ready to go. So I worked on the bottom angle there, cleaned that up, and I put a little bit of a bevel around the base just to make the weld have more contact area. I have measured from that corner of the bar to the back seat area on both sides, and it's the same dimension. I've also measured side to side, so the gap here is equal on both sides, and I feel like it's ready to go. I don't see any reason to change anything. If we look at it from this position, you can see how it just hides behind the corner of the door opening or the window opening, and we can go to the other side. And you can see it does essentially the same thing. Now there could be some slight variable, but it's only going to be, you know, a 1/16 and 1/8 of an inch at most. And as long as my measurements are good from the front to the back and side to side, I see no reason why it can't go right where it's at. Now what I want to do is put a tack on the inside to keep it from moving, because if I put it on the front or the back, it may want to pull the angle, so I don't want to do that. Now, I probably won't film this part, but I'm going to have to get in the car and weld it from the backside. All right, I now have both sides fully welded in at the base, and those are not going to go anywhere. The angle didn't change. Tacking it down seemed to do enough to keep it in position. And now the next part is getting the pieces that go from the top section down to the frame rail. So one of them is laying right there. Now this is a pretty heavy piece of pipe. I mean, this is 1.75 inches, pretty thick. And I went to looking around and I thought, oh, you know what? I have this old handle from something. I hang on to this stuff in case I want to prop up a hood or something. And since it's the same length, I'm going to try to get some perspective here. So if you look up through the trunk area, and if I were to make some sort of contact, I don't need it to be exact, but I'm just guesstimating on a contact point. And you come back here and look, you can see this comes, or the length of that comes all the way to the back section of the frame rail. Initially I was thinking, you know, have it short, have it up here, but it probably makes more sense to have it all the way back here. Now this piece doesn't fit flush because you've got that humped up section right there where the shackle mount is, but that is ideally where you want to have your stress point, right? So you're on top of the shackle mount, not in the middle of the frame somewhere. So I think it's going to end up back here. Now I can weld that up. That's not a problem. I don't want to come back any further because the bumper bracket sits back here. And I have one of those, and if I bring it up here, you'll see it actually overlaps that. Now, is that critical? No, because this is just an extension. It doesn't really change anything. You know, your bumper is going to be bolted here. You've got these points here, welding it down. And even with this little bit of a strut, what I could do is trim this back, angle that down so that it still connects on top of this plate. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm going to try to open up that where that hole is basically right now. I need to enlarge that because based on what I have as an angle, as near as I can tell, somewhere on that hole is where I'm going to be coming through. At least that's my guesstimate. So I'll do a little more calculating and then probably just simply, I don't know if I make it a square hole or not. I may just make a hole right about there and bring that pipe through. We'll see. So I made a hole where I felt it should go, and right now the stick is a little further back than I want it, but I also can go further up on the roll bar itself. So this just gives me a starting point. Now what I'll probably do is enlarge the hole up and slightly inboard. So where I had traced that first outline is probably where I should have drilled the first hole, but I just took a stab at it and that's where it's at. So I'll use my air nibbler more than likely to enlarge that hole. So one of these, and I can just walk it around and make that hole bigger. So I'm going to try that and see how it goes. I also have the cut off pieces from the roll bar. You can see just how thick that is, and I can use that to help me guide up into that where I need it to be. So let's see if I can't make a bigger hole that feels right. So the broom handle served its purpose, at least got me started in the general direction. I started to use the air nibbler And it proved to be difficult because with the air hose connection and the size of this thing, it's really difficult to get in there. And that metal actually changes direction. It's flat for a brief section and then it angles forward. So I have this other tool. It's another nibbler from Bad Dog Tools that I bought at the SEMA show back in 2019. And this helped, get some of this material out of the way, but it was still a bit of a challenge. So what I ended up doing was I have a rotary file. And this is commonly used in the aircraft industry as well. Some might call it a burr, but I just started chewing away at the metal. I didn't have much choice, just to keep on making the hole bigger as much as I could using that and test fitting the pipe as often as I could. This takes time. I mean, I don't know how much time I actually spent doing this. This is time lapse and this is at 4 times the speed, but a lot of this I just didn't film because it's repetitive and kind of boring, but I had to enlarge that hole to make this piece of pipe fit in that opening. So I've been working on getting the driver's side strut piece, I guess I'll call it, that runs from the top of the bar down to the frame rail. And I made that opening on the side there, and I'll show you that in just a second. But I want to show you this. When I uncapped these pieces of metal, they had already created a bird mouth. So that's nice of them to do that. That gives you a head start. But I had to modify this one. So whenever this fits into the shape of the roll bar, if you were going like at a perfect 90 or something like that, or this may work the way they created it, but sometimes you have to reshape it. So that's what I did. And I also had to angle the end of it to make it fit the back section. Now it took me some time to make this opening, and the difficulty with doing something like this is you have nothing to go by. Like I created a hole and I started working it to enlarge it, and it's really hard to judge which way you need to go. So I ended up opening up the side quite a bit more because and I'll show you in a second, but as I attach or connect to that upper section of the roll bar, this was wanting to push outboard. And I want to get it as close to the frame rail and the shock mount as possible. So you can see the spot welds here of where the frame rail is and also the corresponding shock mount location. So initially I was kind of off to the left a little, or let's say to the driver's side a little further than I wanted to be. So I had to open it up, and it makes the hole a little bigger, which isn't a bad thing because whenever you're putting in a roll bar, you don't want a super tight hole. There's still the chance of flex and movement, and so you could have that hole rubbing on the side of the roll bar, making noise and being irritating. So I'm going to set the roll bar up in place here and show you what it looks like at this point. And now you see even more why I didn't want to put the tail panel on, just so I could have access like this, because I would have had to come in from the front rather than the back. So now you can see that opening is actually beneficial. It's not huge, it's not offensive, and if needed be, there could be a cover or something made to fill that up. So right now I have this sitting pretty close to where I want it. I mean, it's looking good. The shackle is basically right here, and I'm almost centered on that. As you follow this frame rail, it changes direction. So when these come back, it actually angles over and then straightens out and comes back in this section. On the top here, I have addressed that bird mouth and made it fit what I feel is very nice. So you can see it from different angles. And of course, this is why I left the roof off, so I can weld this. It makes it much easier access. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with where that lays out. And what I plan to do is I need to weld this plate to the floor and then weld the roll bar piece to both the hoop and this back section. And I will point out I made a little mistake, and it's pretty minor. You can see a little bit of weld right there. And what happened was I cut this just a hair shorter than it needed to be, and rather than just pile up weld on top of that and fill it in, which I could do, I decided to remake this little section. It's not going to affect anything, it's just cosmetic at this point, because there's plenty, you know, you're going to weld all around both sides, build that up really nice. You can't really get up in here. It's not going to, I mean, you could, but it's not going to do much. You really want to have all of your weld strength on the sides anyway, but this will also fill in, and I think it's going to look pretty good. So I'm going to get this piece welded in, and then I'll work on welding in the bar. One thing I do want to show you before I weld this down. This is an awkward shape. Like this is, you know, it comes down, you can see the transition. So this comes down at a slight angle, changes direction a little. You can even see it on the side here where this changes. So what I've done, first of all, is I drilled 4 holes through this plate so that I can weld straight through that into the sheet metal. Just another overkill thing that I want to do, but I'll weld those in, and then I want to weld the perimeter of this. So this front section, I actually bent it down just a little so I wouldn't have this huge gap underneath. So I bent that slightly. Now that won't affect anything, but I just want to show you that because sometimes it helps to look at things from a different perspective, and maybe this will help you if you're trying to do something like this. So this plate is 1/8 inch thick, and the sheet metal, while this isn't the same thickness as maybe the quarter panel or something, it's probably just a little tiny bit thicker. I don't know exactly what the dimension is, but I have to take my time in welding this because this metal, you weld to the thickest metal, and 1/8 inch takes a lot of heat, and you got to be careful you don't burn away the edge or burn through the panel that you're welding to. So I finished welding up these holes that I had drilled, and then I work in segments around the perimeter of this plate. Just can't be in a hurry. You can, whenever I'm welding and I see the heat starting to get higher, I will stop because I don't want to burn through that metal that I'm welding to. This angle is a little more challenging because I'm coming in from the side where the quarter panel is. And you know, in a future vehicle build that I may, if I do something like this, I may consider putting in this plate earlier. And not that it really matters much. I mean, it's still fine. It's not going to affect anything, but it would be easier to weld that without the quarter panel on. So here I'm finishing up this front edge, making sure everything is solid. And once that's done, I'm ready to start welding in the bar. So the plate's welded down, and I'm ready to weld in the bar. I've already tacked it over here on this edge, and I've tacked it up at the top. So I'm going to put this filter on, and we're going to see what it shows. Now obviously it's easier to weld on the exposed portion, so this is going to look better. I do have a decent weld over here. It's not as pretty as this one, but it's not going anywhere. That much I'll guarantee. So the driver's side is fully welded in. Now this plate made it a little difficult to weld because the plate is 1/8 inch and this is basically sheet metal. Well, maybe just a hair thicker than regular sheet metal. So I couldn't just burn it all the way through without running the risk of creating a hole in this panel. So I took my time and I did it in segments. Same thing over here. This is all built in and it's solid all the way around, along with the 4 holes that I drilled and then filled those in. Now the base here, this welded super nice. This thick metal, I love welding this stuff, but you can see how nice this weld is, very pretty. This one also. This one isn't quite as pretty, but the difficulty is being, coming in at an angle and trying to weld that. So I was able to do it. I mean, it's solid. It's not going anywhere. It just doesn't get any extra points as far as being pretty. Now, the top section there, that was difficult. Even though I have the roof off, which I'm glad I approached it that way, because it would be a lot more difficult to try to weld that with the roof in place. So at this point, it's solid. It's not going anywhere. Again, it's not the prettiest overall. I mean, it's not meant to be, but pretty doesn't mean strength. And I know this is not going anywhere. So I'm very happy with this part of it right now. The next thing I need to do is build that side. So I'm going to have to cut down the bar, cut the hole in the panel, do the same thing that I did over here. And then also I have this piece, and that is meant to go between the side legs. And the idea is it supports the seat and your seat belts and anything that you may want to attach to that at that point. There are variations to these. Sometimes you'll see an angle piece. Sometimes you might see an angle and a cross piece, but this kit just has the cross bar, so that's what I'm going with. I did see in some other publications, the 302 Boss chassis manual, I think is what it is. They showed a bar connecting from there to the inner wheelhouse. Now I don't know what you would gain from that. It's part of their program they were doing back in the 70s when they were racing these cars. But I've seen pictures where they show that piece. And I've seen other people do this. They've talked about it on my Facebook post. And I guess there's some value there, but I don't know what you would really gain at such a short distance that it really, I don't know if it would really help at all. So at this point, other than finishing up, this side, and of course, eventually, putting the roof back on, that's probably all I'm going to get done this week. So, busy week. Lots of mental challenges. And I do like those sort of things. Coming up with the system, basically the plate and all that, I like having to think sort of outside the box. And I'm very, very happy with how these are. Those are way stronger than a plate on a floor. I guarantee it. You've got that vertical piece in the middle of the outer or the inner center rocker panel, let's say, and then of course the strapping over to the flange, and of course on top of the torque box. So way, way stronger than putting it straight on the floor. So anyway, I hope you got something out of this video. I try to share as much as I can, give you information that may help you with a project that you're working on. I also want to thank my patrons who continue to support me in making these videos. I appreciate them so much. There's a link in the description box down below if you want to possibly become a patron. That would be great. If not, I understand. There's also a tip jar. So if you feel like I've helped you out in some way and you want to give me a little tip, there's a jar down below, and you can follow that link as well. It's a PayPal link. Otherwise, that'll be it for this video. So don't forget to leave a thumbs up and a comment, share this video, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.